I believe that every part of real estate could benefit from AI. Again, it's so simple. Data equals experience. So we're using a bunch of fancy math to use experience to guide decisions so that you make better decisions.
Welcome back to another episode of Keeping It Real Estate. I'm your co-host, Mike Roeder, and today we have Doug Newell joining us on the show. Doug is a seasoned expert in organizational leadership and advanced analytics. And I met Doug down in New York a couple of weeks ago at an AI conference. And I can't wait to dive into what Doug has been up to and talk a little bit more about his company, Swarmalytics, as well. So with that, Doug, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. By the way, the term seasoned there, that's a euphemism for getting old. But part of that comes to my benefit in that I have watched the birth and blossoming of artificial intelligence, and that's what I'm here to talk about today.
Amazing. Well, I'm excited to dive into it. And, I would love for you to start out by sharing your background.
Sure.
And then also, how you got so involved in AI and building AI companies throughout the years.
Okay, let's see. My background. I have ridden the wave of big data. I came out of graduate school in the 70s, and my first job was Peter Paul Cadbury, where I built a database, having found all of their data on ledger sheets behind a pile of coconut in a warehouse. So that was the sort of the early days. Well, data has continued to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And at one point, I had to abandon standard statistical techniques and look for something new to deal with all the data. I had to squeeze all the value out of the data. Well, we came upon artificial intelligence, which was in its embryo state, and it's continued to blossom. It had a little delay, which caused me some pain. I was out talking about AI and nobody wanted to hear about it for a while. But then AI requires three things: data, processing, and a few algorithms. And the data continued to grow. And the reason the data continued to grow was storage got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. I checked this morning. You can buy 10 terabytes of storage for $160. It means you can buy a petabyte, 1,000 terabytes for about $16K. Nothing in terms of, business expenses. So anyway, these three things have come together, and this is why we're all living through the AI world. Let's demystify AI. AI is simply finding patterns in data. Sort of two major flavors. There is AI of the generative AI, where it's, figuring out how to talk to you and come up with text and so forth. And I focus on the predictive AI. The predictive AI could be something like, let's take 10,000 pieces of information about every house in the United States and determine which ones are going to be turned into rental properties. That is a number crunching ordeal. 113 million houses that you're going to score each one, and you have, for all practical purposes, an infinite number of equations you could create and so forth. So that's the predictive side, and that's the part I'm trying to bring to real estate.
That's amazing. Well, I'm excited to dive into more of the benefits of Swarmalytics and what you have to offer, especially to the real estate world. Before we get into that, though, Doug, what are some of the common misconceptions out there about AI that you encounter, and how are people thinking about it right now?
Well, one thing is there are people, I don't know whether it's intentionally or not, they try to mystify this whole thing. It's like, you couldn't possibly understand AI. It's just so and it's not. Again, it is finding patterns in data. Yes, there's some math involved. No, you don't need to understand the math. For 99% of us don't have to understand the algorithms behind AI. But it's taken a lot of data, which has become available because the storage is so cheap, and it's running through some algorithms which have become so inexpensive because Intel and so forth keep making better and better chips. And you put those two together and you find the pattern. So what I just referred to, which homes are likely to become rental properties, it's a score from an equation. The equation has been generated by looking at many, many cases, millions and millions of cases. Did this become rental? Did it not? And so forth. Finding the patterns. Some of the patterns may be geographic. A property is more likely to become rental if others near it have become rental and so forth. The algorithms discover those by passing the data over and over and over. And we start getting into big numbers. We're talking about sometimes billions and trillions. So it's doing a lot of that stuff, which is irrelevant to most people. But again, it comes out with a fairly simple equation that says, apply this and you can put a percentage on whether this house will be turned into rental. I'd say that's the major one. There are still people who are in shock from having watched Terminator, who think that it was Skynet. Anyway, that these algorithms are going to, take over the world. And in someone's dreams, maybe at some point, but when we get the algorithm to do a good job predicting rentals, we're pretty happy with that. It doesn't go off to start curing cancer or anything else. It just does its little rental prediction.
Got it. That makes sense. And in real estate, it sounds like there could be a ton of benefits regardless of what industry you work in real estate.
Absolutely.
If you're a realtor, if you're an investor,
Yes.
if you're a flipper, if you're a wholesaler, type of data
absolutely. You think about it. You just mentioned one of them there, a flipper. Okay, I try to imagine I'm a flipper. And so maybe I'm a small general contractor and I've got to deal with the peaks and the valleys of business. And I want to flip houses when I've got a crew that's not doing much. I'll apply them to my house to flip that and so forth. But if I'm in Cleveland, you got millions of houses in Cleveland. Where do you start? I mean, that's intimidating. Where do you start knocking on doors saying, would you like to sell me your house because I want to flip it? So if you can have those million houses in the Cleveland area scored and only take the top 100 or 500 or something and communicate to them, leaving 99.99% of them, no chance here. And you just pick off those and you can do that. That saves you a ton of time and money and is likely to make you more successful.
Got it. I absolutely love that. And I think about our industry, multifamily investing and a couple of avenues that you could use that for. You can find, how long people have owned properties for, the typical hold period. Are they likely to sell? When is their loan coming due? And there's all, a ton of different pieces of data that are beneficial to know.
In the case of something like that, one of the predictions we make, we predict for every apartment building its likelihood of being sold. So again, if you've got a portfolio, you got a bunch of money and you want to buy some apartment buildings, knowing which ones are more likely to be sold, and then you may apply other criteria. Like maybe you build another model that says, will I be able to buy this at below market? Is it somewhat distressed or something? So you start applying combinations of these models in order to sort through all the apartment buildings in America and say, oh, here are the 10 that are worth visiting and doing something with.
I love that. So Doug, obviously there is a ton of data out there. How do you decipher on what's accurate data and what data should be thrown out? And is that something that AI can really help with?
Yeah, the good news is we use some proprietary AI as far as the algorithm, and it is fairly insensitive to bad data. So if someone slips a digit or something and puts that this house is worth 30 million instead of 300,000. The model's not going to get all tangled up and wreck the whole model. It will do things in order to minimize the damage. It will basically trim it and say, oh, that's an extreme value, and anything over or maybe $600,000, we're going to reclassify as 600,000, and it fixes that. So that gets dealt with by a decent algorithm. By the way, in the final stage of model building, there's still a human involved. You want to make sure there isn't sort of circular data. An example of circular data, we found that people who bought our houses all got the thank you package for building our houses. Well, the thank you package came after the buying. So you can't have, we should target people who get thank you packages as likely buyers of our houses. No, that doesn't work. You've got the time sequence wrong. So you've got to have a person in there that, after all the crunching, takes a look at it and says, is this solid, reliable model that's going to work?
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah. How about trends? Are there any new trends in the AI space that you're seeing or that, really interest you at this point in time?
Well, the biggest trend, there are two I should bring up. One is the whole generative thing, which I watch like we all watch, and fascinated by it, and I've used it. The other day, I just got on my computer and I said, I want to see Neuschwanstein Castle. I visited it in Bavaria once. I'd like to see that on a starry night in the winter. And in about 5 seconds, the picture was there, and it had picked up on the starry night, and it made it in the style of Van Gogh from his Starry Night pictures and so forth. And it's like, I'm impressed. I'm really impressed. That's cool, but it's not what we do. On the predictive side, what's coming, and I hope that we are at the forefront of it, one size does not fit all. You can't build one model that is going to comfortably fit Malibu, California, and Montgomery, Alabama, and all fit in one equation. The solution is we explode the United States right now into 56 pieces and build a model for each of the 56 pieces and then put them back together. That way, Malibu can maybe be in the same cluster, if you will, as La Jolla or maybe Greenwich, Connecticut or something. But in any case, where we're going on the predictive modeling is going to be the proliferation of models. And this requires a high degree of automation and things like that. So,
got it. I love it. And when you said one size does not fit all, it brought up something that I took away from that New York conference that we were at. One of the panelists had said there's about 7 AI solutions for each problem that you likely have in your business. And if there's not a AI solution, it'll be coming relatively soon. But they're just talking a little bit about vetting different AI companies because there's so many options out there. Any suggestions or advice for our listeners on how to vet, an AI company that they might want to use in their business or in their career?
I'd test. Anybody worth their salt should be willing to do a test. Matter of fact, I've got one coming up in about 45 minutes from now. Someone tossed us a data set, and I won't mention who they are. It's a very big name firm. And they said, see what you can do with this. So we do our thing and we'll show them what we can do with it. And it is up to them to judge the output and our credibility and our explanation of our methodology and things like that. But yeah, do a test. I mean, some of them may want to charge you for the test, but in the end, even the price for that test is going to be minuscule compared to the possible benefit that you get.
Got it. I absolutely love that. Any other advice for businesses looking to implement AI systems at all?
Well, again, going back to the real estate world, real estate doesn't have too much AI in it. Okay. And I'd like to explain why. The reason real estate hasn't adopted AI very much yet, real estate is incredibly fragmented. It's a huge part of the economy, but we have identified 2,600 different new home construction companies out there. And here's sort of the secret. The best data is inside the builders. I have, again, 10,000 pieces of information, including, the distance from every house to the nearest toxic waste dump, or the distance to the nearest school, and the quality of the schools. And we bring all that stuff together. But I sort of have an outside view of these houses. I have no idea what the flooring is. The builder knows what the flooring is. If it's, I don't know, some sort of imported rosewood from Brazil or something, some super high-end flooring, there's no record of that anywhere to be found in the outside world. The builder has it, which is why AI hasn't gone very far. There are 2,600 little silos of these builders. And that's why we're chasing down the idea of a builders consortium, where the builder tosses in their data. They don't have to worry about algorithms or anything. We add our data, and then they get the benefits of AI, which some of those benefits can be, we've scored every piece of property in the United States as to its likelihood of being turned into a residential development. And then we've scored it again as to its likelihood of being sold. Because if it's a farm outside of Austin, Texas, and the farmer is 83 years old or something like that, the likelihood of that being both attractive for development and sold is very high, the intersection of those two things. So anyway, lots of benefits of this. One of the things that really attracted my attention is many builders use a cost plus methodology for pricing, which is, in my opinion, as somebody who's studied economics, a horrible way to price. If it's a hot market, you're leaving money on the table. And if it's a cold market, then you're going to sit on the house for a while till you get what you're looking for. So in any case, I think there's the opportunity, and we've explored it, to use AI to help a builder get the most value out of his efforts by selling the house at the right price. So,
got it. That makes sense.
Those are just a couple of the. There are dozens of ways. You mentioned them earlier that real estate agents can use it. They're looking for listings. Well, wouldn't it be easier if AI was watching everything about the market and determined that this house is much more likely to go up for sale, and maybe you should nurture that person as opposed to just, spray and pray kind of approaches and such. I believe that every part of real estate could benefit from AI. Again, it's so simple. Data equals experience. So we're using a bunch of fancy math to use experience to guide decisions so that you make better decisions. It's as simple as that, and yet it's just taking hold. There, again, in real estate, it is very, very scarce because of all this fragmentation.
That makes sense. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. One other question I have for you is, I think some people get overwhelmed, by thinking about using an AI system or software program or whatnot. Any recommendations there? And then also, how important is it to train whoever's using the AI software or the AI system on a frequent basis to make sure that they're actually taking advantage of everything it has to offer?
Okay, so I'm going to take sort of the second question first there. And the toughest part of this, and the part that I find most challenging, is to get the question right. Okay, it's not about, how clean the data is or anything there. If you ask it a stupid question, it will give you an answer that will do you damage. Okay, I mentioned before looking at land. Well, it's not just what pieces of land look to be attractive for development. It's also, will they sell you the land? If the land has on it, it's a farm, and it has on it a 42-year-old farmer with 3 young children, and it's, this is his nest and it's been in the family for generations and things like that. You've asked it the wrong question. If you just, would that be nice? Yeah, of course it would be nice. And you have no chance of ever buying it. So you have to tailor the question: what properties are developable and likely to sell? And then maybe you put in another thing and what the financial benefit might be from buying that particular thing. But the computers allow me to, again, score every property in the United States, every empty property, in less than an hour on my computers. We've got our own data center here and so forth, and we just blast it out, and whatever hundreds of millions or whatever, they all get a score, and then you can use that to start willowing down to something you're going to make a decision on, or you're going to invest in manual exploration or something like that.
Yeah. So Doug, let's circle back to, the AI conference that we were in recently. It was called AI in Real Estate. IMN put it on in New York. Great conference. A lot of panelists that were, giving us some great information. What were some of your top takeaways from the event?
I was impressed by a number of the speakers. I filter them. It's like, okay, this person's sort of learning what's going on and so forth. And this one knows the deal and is giving great advice and is part of, again, the vanguard of bringing AI into real estate. That particular conference, it was heavily oriented towards property management, which I think is a whole nother thing. I mentioned we're putting together a builders consortium. In the back of my mind is maybe a year from now, there ought to be a property management consortium as well. The idea, bring data together, find the patterns in the data, apply them to make a more efficient economy. It works. So anyway, I was learning as I was there because I've been focused on property residential construction. And again, the real estate space, I can't remember. I think it's a $7 trillion part of the economy or something. It is so big. There are things to be learned about how a real estate agent looks at things and so forth that we can all continue to learn.
Got it. Appreciate you sharing that. And, let's circle back to Swarmalytics.
Yes.
Are you able to share some of the most exciting developments that you're working on right now and anything that you're doing to try to better the company?
Yeah, I mentioned that fragmentation, the splitting things into smaller models. Right now, we're doing that manually. Again, we score all the properties in the United States as to their likelihood of being sold and turned into rental and likelihood of being flipped and what the rental value will be and things like that. We have a whole suite of those. And we manually split the United States into these 56 pieces, not necessarily geographically contiguous or anything. I've got a team in Ukraine who has been working on the next generation of AI software, which would automatically do that fragmentation. And we've made some very nice progress. The great team I came upon in Ukraine, so they do it inexpensively and very, very high quality. So I'm hoping in the next year to start using that commercially, where it will automatically be trying all sorts of segmentation and squeeze more prediction out of even more data. I mentioned we have about 10,000 variables now. Once we get the consortium going, I wouldn't be surprised if we had 30,000 variables to search through, including, how many sets of French doors are in a house. Or we have found a significant predictor of the value of the house is the material used in the roofing. I don't know why, but we searched through all this stuff and we had roofing material in the data set. And I don't know whether it's coming up with who has slate roofing. Isn't that real high end or something? Anyway, I'm not a roofer, but we found that is a strong predictor, and we're likely to find other subtleties as well. And maybe that feeds back into some decision by a builder as to how to optimize a high-end house what's the materials. Oh, I can tell you one other as well. From analyzing sales of millions of previously built houses, whatever you want to call it, having the word stainless in the MLS listing is worth its weight in gold almost. People like stainless steel appliances, and when we work the numbers, it comes close to, even if you have fairly new appliances in the house sells so much faster and at a higher price that it's almost worth your while to rip out your existing appliances and put in stainless just so that you can attract the connoisseurs.
Yeah.
So anyway, lots of interesting things. You find things and then you look for the reasons why, kind of thing. And having this word stainless popping up as the most powerful predictor of higher value homes. And it's like, stainless? What? Stainless steel appliance. Got it. Yeah.
That's amazing. All kinds of unique data points that can be really beneficial.
Yes.
I would love to talk a little bit more about top concerns in AI. Like you had mentioned before, there's some individuals that are, worried that AI is going to take over. You said not much of a concern there. I was actually talking to a ownership group out in New York, and they said through their AI that they had implemented, there was a resident that kept prompting it. And it finally got about $100 or $150 off of its rent, and it wasn't supposed to do that. Or you think about, if someone was able to hack in, and maybe diverge some information. Anything that you're concerned about or that we should be paying close attention to at all? So.
I'm not concerned about data security, sort of knock on wood, that, again, I mentioned we have our own data center and it has layer and layer and layer of security, physical security, as well as virtual. And I'll tell you what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the government stepping in and messing the whole thing up. Europe has been more aggressive in these things, and all you'll do is drive something underground. If I can predict which houses are likely to be flipped, and the government says, you cannot do that. That's, somebody passes an anti-gentrification bill kind of thing. No, you can't do that. Do you think that stops me from putting something through an algorithm that is not detectable and, coming up with the list and renaming the list or selling it in the black market or what? It's a big deal. So people in government think that they have to get involved somehow or they'll miss the boat. And sometimes it's okay to just let the boat sail on and us all have better decisions based on data without interference.
Got it. That makes sense. I think that's a concern in every industry.
Yeah, it is.
It makes sense. I mean, even in multifamily real estate in general, anytime the government is stepping in, typically it's not a good thing, especially for owners, business owners, investors, and whatnot. So,
and again, it just puts people to work figuring out workarounds. For instance, the recent lawsuit in the property management business by Department Trade Commission, I guess. There are ways that you could predict rents, which was what they were objecting to, without using the rents of the participant. So there are workarounds there. As soon as they try to stop progress with this hand, another thing is going to pop open of somebody's going to work around it. So it's counterproductive for the government to be involved, and it's futile. Progress is going to happen whether they want it to or not. So just my opinion.
No, I like that. And, before we part ways, Doug, I would love for you to give our listeners a book or a podcast recommendation. And because we're talking about AI today, any specific AI podcasts or books that you're paying close attention to that you'd recommend?
Well, I think we've got some posted on my company's website. So I'd recommend they go to swarmalytics.com. And we don't have it up and going yet, but this idea of a consortium, we'll be posting some podcasts to buildersconsortium.ai. And so either of those, but the Swarmalytics one has a number of things. It's got some videos sort of explaining our process. It's got some podcasts and so forth. Please go there. And again, if any of your listeners has any questions, I'd be happy to take them. I can be reached at 828-206-4062. And that's, again, Doug Newell at Swarmalytics. Swarmalytics, the idea of swarming against a problem from many different directions. That's why we named the company that, and that's where we're going.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today, Doug. And for anyone listening, feel free to reach out to Doug. We'll put that number in the show notes as well. And thanks again for coming on.
Thank you for the invitation. I've enjoyed it.
You're welcome. And thanks so much for everyone for tuning into another episode of Keeping It Real Estate. If you haven't already, make sure to visit our website and fill out our Contact Us form so we can keep you up to date on all the important real estate news coming out. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week on another episode of Keeping It Real Estate.